Mr Gapes, it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I'd like to congratulate my honourable friend from Berwick-upon-Tweed. We largely cooperate on defence matters, but now we can add puffins to those areas where we cooperate. I suspect we'll both be speaking in the combat air strategy tomorrow, and I like her analogy of puffins as fighter jets, and I look forward to a mention of a puffin in the Tempest programme tomorrow from the honourable member. It is true that every bird matters, but as we've heard from this debate, every puffin matters as well. Before I get into the detail of this, I'd like to share my favourite puffin story, because as we've heard from the honourable members opposite, we all have our favourite puffin story. Mine is in relation to the puffins on the west coast of Ireland, on the Skellig Islands. Now, those amongst you that are sci-fi nerds may already know what I'm going to talk about, and that is that the Skellig Islands were used as a filming location for Star Wars The Last Jedi, and there were so many puffins on the Skellig Islands as they were trying to film Luke Skywalker's last hangout there that they couldn't airbrush the puffins out of the movie. So they decided to turn them into their very own Star Wars species, and the porgs were born. And so if you watch Star Wars Last Jedi, you will see plenty of porgs in and around Luke Skywalker's coastal hut, and they are indeed puffins. And so a bit of bedtime watching for the honourable member opposite. Anyway, back to the substance of this debate. I think it is true, as we've heard from members opposite, that human activity is affecting the habitats of so many of our planet's valuable wildlife. Through irreversible climate change, habitat destruction and biodiversity loss, we're making survivals of species that we love and appreciate increasingly difficult. In a debate last month, we heard about how the cruel practice of netting of bird nesting sites prevents seabirds from nesting on some cliff faces. In that debate, I made clear that we must not keep squeezing nature into smaller and smaller spaces. And certainly from what we've heard today about puffin habitats, they're already on very small spaces geographically. Britain is home to around 10% of the world's puffin population, with nearly 600,000 breeding pairs. They're often found in clusters around the British Isles coastline, and it is brilliant to hear of the experiences of various members and the puffin populations in their own part of the world, as the member for Preseli Pembrokeshire spoke about on Skomer Island, from Ayr, Carrick and Cumnock on the west coast of Scotland, and in the area that I represent in the southwest, of course, we have puffin populations on Lundy Island off the north coast, and also on the Isles of Scilly as well. And in Lundy, we have a similar experience to the ones that the honourable member from Berwick-upon-Tweed spoke about in relation to tackling invasive species. Because on Lundy, we're beginning to have a puffin comeback. And that's because, after many years of puffins being on the brink of eradication, a programme to deal with the accidental introduction of rats from visiting boats has really started showing good results. Thanks to this Lundy Seabird Recovery Project, puffin numbers are now increasing, and this is a great example of how targeted action can bring great results, correcting the damage that humans have done to these vital habitats. Now, we know that puffins are found in small clusters, and that leaves them more susceptible where there are changes in local fish populations, as we've heard from the SNP spokesperson a moment ago. Now, puffins are on the RSPB's red list of conservation importance, which means urgent action is needed to prevent their decline. On the Isles of Scilly, we've witnessed firsthand the success of the Seabird Recovery Project, which the honourable member for St Ives, who's not in his place today but asked me to mention on his behalf. This project, EU-funded project, has done great work in removing items of rubbish and eradicating invasive species of the island, leading to the fast recovery of the Manx shearwater, but also the puffin as well. And I'd appreciate if the Minister in his remarks could set out what government plans they have to replace specific EU-funded schemes like that deal with rare bird habitat protection. Now, the RSPB describes the main threat to puffins as a change in distribution numbers of small fish. Drastic changes in the numbers of small fish in the local area around puffin habitats can occur if there's increased pollution in the area, as we've heard from the debate, either from plastic or other pollutants such as oil. Overfishing in those areas also poses a threat, with sustainable fishing paramount to the survival of seabird species. Now, the Minister will be aware that his colleague on his side of the House, the honourable member for Waveney, has tabled an amendment to the Fisheries Bill to ban sand eel fishing. Now, as we've heard from the member from Berwick-upon-Tweed, sand eels are indeed one of the puffin's key diets, and so I'd be grateful in his remarks if he could also set out what the government's position is to sand eel fishing and the amendment to the Fisheries Bill in relation to this. Happy giving way on that point.
Has my honourable friend any thoughts for particularly inshore fishermen of the additional work or assistance that they could play in supporting the environments that puffins need to be free from that kind of pollution and to support those puffin habitats?
Well, I'm grateful for the intervention from my honourable friend from Great Grimsby. And actually, yes, there are important roles that fishers can play in this. And one of those is dealing with ghost gear. Because although, as we've heard, these puffins are small birds, they are susceptible for eating plastics. And that is something that ghost gear, so discarded fishing gear, can play a really important part of. And I know in her area, and certainly in my area, the fishers are taking steps to deal with ghost gear. Not only is it very expensive and a cost to the business, it also presents a real risk to wildlife and bird habitats. And so actually, I would keep encouraging her, as I know she is doing with her fishers in her area, to tackle the plastic pollution. And actually, the plastic pollution is an area that I would like to turn to now in relation to the nurdles. So one thing that is incredibly worrying and was alluded to in the remarks that have come from a number of honourable members in this debate is the long-term survivability of puffins in their diet. It's not only the sand eels and the other fish that we've heard they eat, puffins also eat plastic. And as we've seen from varieties of studies, dead puffins being washed up on the beaches, having been cut open, are having their stomachs full of nurdles. Now, these are very small plastic pieces, the key component in how you melt down plastic to make it into larger items, but their nurdles are also the consequence of macroplastics being broken down. And what we're seeing is puffins, as well as other seabirds, their stomachs being filled full of plastics, so they're not able to get the necessary nutritional value from their food as they might otherwise do. And so what we lack here, though, as we've heard from the understanding about what do puffins get up to while at sea, is actually more science around the effect of plastics on specific populations of birds, puffins being a good example of that. Now, I know there's much research that's actually taking place in Scotland in relation to seabirds and plastics, but it'd be grateful if the Minister could also set out what his vision is to deal with the scientific evidence base, because I think if we have the true understanding about the effects of plastics on puffins and other seabirds, it makes it easier for the public to get behind more action in relation to it. Now, seabirds are currently protected by a network of marine protected areas, and I'm very pleased to hear that the marine protected area in the honourable friend from Berwick-upon-Tweed's constituency has been granted by the government, and good that the eider duck has been included in the protected bird species there, because I have heard her speak on a number of occasions about the importance of the eider duck, and so they should not be left out of this. Now, I want to see a network of national marine parks created around the UK because it provides the opportunity to take what is sometimes quite complex marine protected areas and make it plain English. Now, we've already got a network of marine conservation zones, European designations, sites of special scientific interest, and the list, frankly, Mr Gates, goes on and on and on and on. And because there are so many different forms of marine protection and so many forms of marine protected designations, it makes it harder for the public to access them. And I think there's real opportunities with the review that the government is doing on national parks to look at the development of national marine parks. And certainly I know the Minister will be familiar with the work that Plymouth City Council are doing in terms of leading the work to have the first national marine park in Plymouth Sound that enjoys cross-party support at a local level in Plymouth. And I think protecting more marine areas will, I think, contribute to the greater understanding and public awareness that we heard from the honourable member from City Pembrokeshire in terms of the paparazzi and the importance of taking care when visiting those puffin habitats. Now, finally, Mr Gapes, I was very pleased that the House agreed recently to a Labour motion on declaring a climate emergency. It was a really important part of the debate that actually shows that this place is taking climate change seriously. And I know honourable members from both sides will have visited the climate change protesters as the time is now climate protest today. We need not only to think of climate change as carbon, although we do need to tackle and decarbonise our economy, we need to think of how we tackle climate change equally about how we protect coastal habitats, how we protect bird nesting sites, their feed, their conservation, and that is precisely what we've heard of today. I'm very grateful to the honourable member for giving a chance for people to talk about their favourite puffin stories, and I hope that more people will be able to do so in the coming weeks and months ahead. I know the Minister has a full to-do list in the department, but I hope that he will take seriously the concerns that have been voiced about the wonderful, brilliant, comical puffins, and take note that actually their decline is a sign of humanity's intervention in our wildlife, and actually we need to do more to protect puffins, and if we do more to protect puffins, it will save and protect other important habitats and other seabird populations as well. Thank you, Mr Gapes.